there.
There she is.
Cool. And I have a stupid spiel that I'm going to read. I hope it's not too dumb, but it doesn't matter by this point because, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome. My name is Lorne Riseley, host of the Halcyon Show, and I'd love to give you advice on your mortgage. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Today I learned that we welcome a man so relaxed, easygoing and chilled to his core in his work that frankly I'll feel winter is finally here. So time to fade into shelter and get out from the cold as we meet our guest. He's a talented and experienced singer, songwriter, producer, artist, full-time musician, part-time everything else, live performer and battler with a penchant for the nuanced and deliberate. But is he up to the task of an interview with me? Time will tell as I set out my inner Sisyphus and we throw down the gauntlet to see if he really is as cool as his persona implies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Heretic, aka Mr. Harry J. Robinson is in the house.
Thank you very much. That was a really impressive intro, actually. Very comprehensive. In the business, what we call a scheme, for those who won't have picked up on all of my song titles in there, which I can't imagine anyone really has because there aren't that many people who know all of them. So yeah, fair play. Love it.
10 points to any of you who can name all of them. I've highlighted them in red and I'll keep them on a document. You don't win anything except my respect and love, which we can all agree is worth nothing. But anyway, and again, I said this off camera, I'll say it again on camera. I've been dying to talk to you because, no word of a lie, your career kind of encapsulates everything I wanted to do when I was a young man, kind of figuring out what I wanted to do in life, just thinking about going to uni, thinking about maybe doing sixth form and finishing up and going into something. You've gone ahead and done pretty much everything from a creative standpoint. So my first question is, you now, looking back on that, how does that feel? How does the fact that you get to boast a almost 15-year career touring, making music, producing, just creating cool shit for more than a decade?
God, it's interesting. I suppose it's one of those that you never really kind of stop and look around you and look at the things that you've done. I think really, it's just kind of a case of, I feel like just the sort of person I am and the way my brain is wired is that I just kind of have to make stuff all the time in order to not go completely mental. And having like been to music college for uni and all that kind of stuff and gone into battle rap, I'll just like pick up hobbies or creative interests and then they just sort of swallow my life a little bit. So yeah, I guess in terms of the career, like I've had day jobs more or less that whole time, or been in education or whatever, but I think the fact that like I've always needed to fill the rest of my waking hours with making stuff or performing stuff, just means that there's a fair amount of it to speak of at this point as I approach 30.
Because I read in an interview that you did that you were asked, like, what do you see for the future? Like, what do you see in 5 years' time? And you were very present when you answered. You said, listen, it really depends on how it does, this most recent project. It's going to guide me. It's going to give me direction. It's going to inform my next step. So is that part of it? Is it that you feel like you have to remain present? So being retrospective and then introspective is something that kind of detracts from what you try to do?
That's a good question. Maybe. I think there's maybe two halves to that question. There's like the side of it which is like, what do I choose to do professionally in terms of like what moves I'm trying to make, versus like how do I choose to like express myself, or what do I choose to create or write down or whatever. In terms of like the sort of strategic side of things, more recently I've stopped being so bothered with like, yeah, but the optimal strategy is you do a single and then you do an EP and then you build up and because I'm now more at the point where it's like I just don't care anymore. I just need to like get the ideas down and the thoughts down and kind of stick my flag in the ground, and whatever happens with it happens. So I think previously I would have been a little bit more trying to do the chess moves of like, oh yeah, but I'm trying to maneuver my way through the creative industries and stuff. And I think after a while you just get a little bit jaded with that, and it very quickly then takes away from like, maybe I just want to write an album and like just for my own sake, for my own, so that I have that body of work to speak of, even if like received wisdom is, oh, but you need to make sure you release an EP and that you have this signed under whatever, that kind of stuff. So yeah, more so these days, I'm just trying to do the thing that I feel like doing and not bothering about the rest of it.
I love that you've touched on this because I'm just trying to get onto the social media algorithm, platformy, wormy thingy that we're all kind of governed by. But I find it laborious too. I find it quashes my creative direction. I find that it means I don't feel like I have the license to experiment and fully explore an idea before someone comes in and just goes, oh, that won't work. Why? Well, because the algorithm's not going to get it. And it's like, but how is art supposed to propagate? How is it supposed to evolve and incorporate new things and then spawn other things too? So my question to you there is then, what exacerbated, was there a tipping point for you in that respect then? Was it just a case where you just reached a moment where you're like, to be honest, I think I've kind of done my time adhering to the kind of way it's done?
I think it's just the grinding process of getting older and or at least like having this sort of so when I first really, obviously I went by Heretic in the battle rap days. That was a name I had from when I was like 14. And then I feel like I kind of outgrew it and it just made me cringe a bit. And I'd finished battle rap and I'd sort of changed my name. So I started releasing music under Harry J. Robinson. And then it was like, wow, you've got like a fresh, clean slate here. So you've got to do everything right. You've got to make the most of it. And my first song that I released did really, really well. And it's like still my best performing song. And you feel like, oh, I'm going to build this momentum and whatever. But like when things then just happen in a non-linear way, like you don't have just like straight, staircase growth or whatever, you then, I feel like over time, at least I like just kind of let go of my attachment to that idea of like everything has to happen step by step in this particular way, and then it just becomes more about like therefore why would I allow that side of things to like constrain my thinking or like what my creative practice is going to be, when I could just like do whatever I want, and then whether or not it works is, in terms of like the whatever our metrics of success are, it's just kind of immaterial until it gets to that point.
What is success for you at this stage then? Because of course we're all, again, numbers seem to be everything to a lot of people these days. And I just remember thinking when I started on YouTube in particular, like I'm crazy happy if someone watches it. I don't even care if they like it. In your field, considering, look, you're a talented dude. I've spent the day just cramming music as far as, and one of the things that struck me is not only an evolution, but a thematic consistency in terms of, I want to get into what I think you're attracted to later, but like, what is success for you these days now that you've had a period of time where you've gotten to do various projects, work in different ways, and explore different avenues of being creative too?
Sure. So right now, this specific moment, success to me is just finishing my album. So that's what I'm like focused on at the moment, because I think this is where my head's at currently. And as I alluded to before, it's like I spent so long being fixated in the like strategy of like just write this amount, release this amount, whereas like now that I've been a musician for like my whole life and I still don't have that full length body of work, I'm like I need to like reach that checkpoint and just kind of state my case in like a full project of like where I am at the moment. So just finishing that project, and I guess releasing it in some form, I would consider success in terms of what I'm trying to do at the moment. And I'm purposefully trying not to think about how many people listen to this hypothetical album anyway.
Okay, that leads me to another interesting, well, at least it's interesting to me because I struggle with it, okay? And I want to preface this question with a tweet, not from this gentleman, but from a gentleman by the name of Mr. Tony D. Just spent far too long watching Harry J. Robb make a table from a log. Pretty sound table, though. Now, I have two things to that. Number one, Tony, seriously, like, I can't get 5 minutes on the phone with you and you'll watch a whole he made a whole table, and you're my uncle, man. And secondly, right, you have a lot of different eyes on the fire, and that must mean focus. How do you keep your tires on the road in terms of working on a project? How do you not get distracted by the various things you could be doing at any one moment?
Oh no, well, the short answer is I don't. Like, everything kind of is a distraction. I've always leapt from one thing to another, had like extreme dedicated focus on one thing for a little while and then put it down. And I recently found out I have ADHD, and that probably goes some way to explaining. I'm hesitant to like make that an explanation for every aspect of my personality and behavior, but certainly that element sort of, it checks out, I guess, in terms of like, yes, like you say. So I've got my solo project music. I also play keys in a band. I also do like comedy script writing and stuff. And I also took up woodworking like a year and a half ago, kind of just for shits and giggles, and ended up accumulating all this equipment and making all of this stuff. But I've like not really done any woodworking in a couple of months because I'm now like just completely zoned in on an album, and then like my little woodworking shop is gathering dust in the corner. But I know that, in a few months' time, when I kind of dry up or whatever, and or I have a period of not being able to write very much, I'll be making random shit out of wood again. So it's just it's all a distraction. It's all just jumping back and forth between everything.
I have a selfish question to ask in that respect then, because, and this is a true thing, we talked about this off air as well. I had a whole video where I just did it because I wanted to play with my new toy. And I've tried to get use out of it every day since, because it wasn't £2. But here's my question to you then. What's the thing that you are happiest that you got in the moment, got most excited to used it, and now it's currently gathering, like, not the worst investment idea, but certainly something that gave you a lot of joy very intensely, and now it's,
Well, something that I still haven't got my money's worth out of use for, but I still maintain, at least to myself, that I will do in the long term, is that I bought a wood turning lathe. So this is like basically a contraption that like spins a long bit of wood towards you, and you use a chisel to like scrape it down and shape it into various things. Anyway, this like 1940s like massive iron carpenter's lathe was going secondhand on eBay, and it was like collection only from not too far away from where I live, and it was on auction. So it was one of those where it's like you could actually get this for like an insane bargain just because of the parameters of the auction. So they're normally worth about £600, and I got it for like 170 when I did the bidding. And it is like an absolutely absurd, like my girlfriend and all of my friends were like, what have you done? Why have you done this? And I'm like, well, once I'm making all sorts of trinkets, hopefully that will explain itself. But I haven't made all sorts of trinkets yet. We'll get there though.
I had to ask because, look, I meant it in the intro, because one of the things that I got for Christmas when I was maybe 10 or 11 or 12, whenever it was an electric guitar. I begged for that guitar for 6 months, right? I had Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication on all summer because I was just imagining doing the riff in the middle, right? Get the guitar, 3 months. It turns out I can't play guitar. Turns out it's really, really hard to learn.
Yeah.
And I still own it. It's still back there somewhere. But like, fuck have I ever learnt to use it. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, creatives of the world, it's okay. It's cool to have cool shit. But
yeah, I mean, it's the steepness of the learning curve, isn't it? Because you have the initial excitement of like, oh my God, I have a guitar. I'm going to be Jimi Hendrix. And then you're like very quickly confronted with the fact that in order to be Jimi Hendrix, you need to spend like a couple hours a day. Well, in order to even be able to play like just a couple of Jimi Hendrix songs, you need to like be able to put hours and hours and hours in. And that like initial rush of enthusiasm only really takes you so far. And the difficulty is you don't know whether you've picked up the thing that you're going to have sustained enthusiasm for until you buy it and give it a go. And that's how I've ended up wasting lots of money over my life. But, it's worth finding out, isn't it?
it is, and I like it when answers segue into questions that I wrote, because one of the things I wrote down about you, it's again another interview that you did where you referenced the fact that you don't like to box yourself into any one role, and in the early part of your career you spend a lot of time, quote, bluffing to learn on the job, but that then allows you the opportunity to earn enough money to then reinvest in yourself. The question I have is, how do you keep motivation in those moments when you are doubting yourself, when you are still, I mean, even now, again, you're 30, nearly 30 years old, or you're getting into my bracket of age group where you're supposedly supposed to have shit figured out, and trust me, I don't. But the fact is, right, you have to keep that motivation because there are people that are going to doubt you, undermine you. There's going to be people that question you. How do you maintain it?
I think it's a sort of Well, I kind of just see it as a bit of fun. Like, the phrase "how hard can it be" is a phrase that I kind of often jokingly use whenever there's like something. So like the with the woodworking stuff, I'm like, I kind of just want to build a coffee table, and I didn't know what I was doing or how. But it's like, first of all, how hard can it be, and also like, how wrong can this meaningfully go? Like, I'm just gonna, if I really do a terrible job, then I have a bad coffee table, or I just take it to the recycling or whatever. And so I try and approach life with as much of that attitude as possible. I guess the difficult thing is when is if it comes to like something, I don't know, maybe quite high risk, or like like a big investment or a big leap of faith or whatever. But it is sort of a case of going, well, how hard can it be, and then just going for it and seeing what happens. Because what is the worst that can happen, really?
The worst that could happen is that your old man ribs you relentlessly for the following 22 years about that time he bought you that guitar and you didn't turn into a rock star, and oh gosh and golly, and don't worry, Dad, I'm working on it. But the point I'm making with that is that for a creative, especially someone who doesn't have, I'm talking about me here for a second, something that immediately speaks to them, right? A lot of people give up, right? And I'm not saying that that's the case, but you've obviously dabbled in a lot of different things through curiosity. You had talent, so you were able to pursue it. My question there is, in terms of enjoyment factor, what do you derive from it these days compared to when you were younger? Obviously, the younger element, it's the learning, it's the, wow, everything's new and exciting. What about now?
Ooh, that's a good question. In terms of any one particular, as in terms of like music, or in terms of just creating in general?
Obviously music is an extension of that, but I obviously, being a creative person, I know that I got Canva recently and I got excited about the fact that it gives you a bunch of stuff that you can use just off the bat, and that doesn't matter that I'm 34 years old and it's a relatively benign tool, but it was an opportunity to explore and expand my creative base.
Yeah,
but it's still the learning part, it's still the growing part that excites me. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. I think the thing that allowed me, when I was first like doing music and learning to produce when I was like 14, 15, was the fact that like Logic Pro and all of the instruments and whatever were all like completely brand new. So it was kind of like having a massive sandbox full of toys, and you don't know, you press all of these buttons and you don't know what's going to happen. And kind of starting from that really, really like naive place is very exciting, because it means you can just go with your intuition and kind of see what happens. And I think now that I'm more experienced in terms of music production and stuff, I think it's a little bit harder to harness that like more naive kind of playful energy, because you kind of default to like, well, I know what this software does and I know what and you kind of need to channel a little bit of that, like, I'm 14 and I'm just finding out what this does. But I think that's why, part of the reason why I love picking up a random new hobby like buying a woodworking lathe, because I don't have the burden of knowing what I'm doing. I just can like grab a chisel and a bit of wood and go, well, let me just see what happens. And I think that kind of then recaptures, I think, some of that energy that is really helpful when you're trying to kind of be creative and unlock that part of your brain.
I want to talk about your music for a second, because now we have a problem. Okay, we have a big problem. Okay. In that I was listening to your music today, and I'm supposed to be concentrating, right? I'm supposed to be listening to the nuances and trying to pick out themes and try to find, aspects of the song that I can pick up to sound clever in the interview. I was just chilling out, man. I was just letting it wash over me. And what struck me is the delicacy of it. It's so... Restraint is the wrong word. It's like a painter that knows just the right stroke and just the amount of paint to put on something to give it the highlight and the hue it needs, without beating you over the head about, look at the hue I made, look at the nuance. My question is that delicacy intentional? And if so, how did you hone that? How did you come to craft that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, like, before I started releasing music under my own name, I made loads of music that was kind of all over the place genre-wise, like it was kind of back and forth here, there, and everywhere. And it was sort of a case of like, there were a couple of songs that I had made in my like past life that felt like me, like the most kind of like best suited to my style and my voice and the way that I write, and that was much more in the kind of chill, understated vibe. So I sort of, I guess, then worked on kind of trying to refine how I like write and arrange and produce around that. So yeah, it's kind of, you're pulling from like the sort of lo-fi hip hop type stuff. Also, like, I'm not a particularly accomplished multi-instrumentalist, so if I wanted to do like a really fancy virtuosic saxophone solo, I wouldn't be able to anyway. So it's like I kind of have to be relatively kind of simple and straightforward in the way that I do things. But also there's, I guess, certain ideas and almost like mission statements I kind of have in my head when I'm putting something together. And one thing that I always want to capture, if not in every song, at least in every project, is the like a feeling of being in a hot bath. You know, when you slide down and all of the hot water comes over you and you get that little tingle. That's like the feeling that I'm always trying to capture when I'm producing something. And I think the way that that comes through is often with just kind of a handful of elements, just kind of what, like you said, when you said you just let it wash over you, that's exactly what I want to hear, because that's kind of the intention, really.
Every song had that signature part where it sort of eases you into the song first, and then it'll either catch you with its initial pace or the sort of the hook you're going for. But I just found myself every single song just kind of like not concentrating, because I was just kind of in it. You know what I mean? Like, I was like a lot of people during the lockdown period when I discovered Nujabes and a lot of the lo-fi stuff on the YouTubes. And so it was really easy for me to get into your music from that perspective. But one of the things that I also noted is like the way that you sing and perform and a lot of the lyrics you utilize, there is, I don't want to say there's a vulnerability, there's an honesty. You don't go overarching emotional, but you don't also then come across as like indifferent to the emotion. Question I had for you is that again a deliberate choice? And if so, how did you strike that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everything I write is like extremely vulnerable and kind of punishingly overly kind of confessional and stuff. But I think that might be the case. That might be essentially me thinking about myself too much and being a little bit too like, oh God, I'm putting absolutely everything out here. But yeah, I just, it sort of felt like, yeah, that just ended up kind of being what I wanted to write. I think it basically it didn't help that like around the time that I launched my solo project, I was like super depressed and just like having a really, really shit time. And so like the atmosphere and the kind of existential situation that I was capturing there was a lot of like heavy introspection and kind of wading through the treacle of being, you know, in your 20s and miserable and what have you. And yeah, it that just kind of ended up being like, when I sit down to write, it's normally in something of a therapeutic way. So I'm then kind of digging through and finding whatever words and metaphors and ways of exploring whatever I'm feeling as a way of getting that across.
I mean, just again, ladies and gentlemen, I am I'm not a musician. Neither am I a particularly delicate reviewer of things. I have made these notes about the song The Gauntlet. Lo-fi vibes, reminiscing on mistakes, lamenting, split in time, somewhere else in the multiverse. The reason I wrote that is because I find that interesting, that particular premise, this idea of almost reminiscing about a time that doesn't exist but could have done, and being cognizant of that, but also being like that. Again, it's a balance of emotions. It's not, you're not really drilling into one emotion. You're being quite, it's the relaxation of it. I wasn't listening to it, you know, with pulling it in my heartstrings. I was just with it. I was going with the energy of it. I guess the question with that one is then, if you're saying that from your perspective, at least, you are pouring your heart out and you are being quite vulnerable, do you feel like then that's translated in your work in a different way? Is it expressed in a different way in your work other than in the composition of the song?
I think it varies from song. I think some songs are more that than others. I think The Gauntlet is a slightly more... The Gauntlet is basically the plot to Everything Everywhere All at Once. I can't remember. I didn't think I'd seen the film when I watched it, but it's that kind of concept of you have this like decision paralysis of all of the various lives that you're able to lead, and you're kind of, whatever you choose to do in life, you kind of end up you know, finding reasons to regret it because you didn't do any of the other million things that you could have done. And there's a bit of a sort of existential quandary there. And so that kind of whole EP, which was called Mirrors, that sort of had that as like a bit of a vague through line. And like from song to song on that EP, some of them, like there's one called Today I Learned, which was like pretty much written in the middle of like a full-blown emotional, not quite a break, it was almost the opposite of a breakdown. It was like the one moment I felt like human in the middle of like a really, really miserable period, and that felt like that was like every thought and feeling that I had kind of straight on the page. Whereas like some of the other songs on that EP are a little bit more kind of just exploring like the ideas of, you know, are you making the right decisions in life? Are you at the right point? And finding different ways and kind of metaphors of dressing them up. So yeah, I feel like from song to song, you get, it's like turning one dial up and the other dial down. You kind of get a bit of the very, very raw specific, like here's what I'm feeling at the time versus like here's how I'm trying to translate it into something that's a little bit more descriptive.
You've touched on something there, and I've asked this question before, so I'm sorry for repeating myself from a previous interview, but it's happened to me, and I'm curious how it happens to you. So when I was in sixth form and still aspiring to be a famous artist of some description, I used to watch a television show called Heroes, and the reason I used to watch that is because the artist character in that show used to paint these giant murals of significance and proportion in the scheme of the show, and I just like that concept of the idea that art being significant in a more direct way. Mm-hmm. But the other thing as well is it used to inspire me, and I used to have these moments at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd wake up from sleep and I'd go, I have to draw that. I have to sketch that now to make sure I don't forget what I'm thinking in this moment, because I know I'm going to want to come back to it. But my question to you is, that's my inspiration. It just fucking hits, and I know I got to get it or not. Does that happen for you? Or if not, where does your inspiration come from?
So I definitely get those moments. I'll have...
When's the worst time it's happened? I've got to ask. Like, when's the most inappropriate or
I've not.
Annoying time?
To be honest, it's never been like I must stop everything and go and sit at my computer and, you know, box myself in and create. It's more just like a little idea, kind of. It's almost, you know, something appears in your peripheral vision and you're like, ooh, yeah, and it'll be like a little combination of words or half of a melody or whatever, and essentially I'll add those in my notes app in my phone or in my voice notes, and it'll be a case of like I'm sort of out living my life, and then I accumulate. It's like this little box of trinkets of these little half-formed musical ideas or, you know, conceptual ideas, and then the next time I'm like sat at the desk actually with my keyboard and everything, I'll basically just kind of go through the box and be like, okay, is anything here gonna stick? So thankfully it's not a case of like, I've never like got up at 3 a.m. and be like, I have to spend the rest of the night writing a song. A lot of my songwriter friends, or at least a couple of my songwriter friends, do describe experiences like that. But thankfully I just get my full night's sleep and do what I need to do.
I'm jealous then, because it doesn't happen to me quite so much anymore. But again, when I was younger, sort of 18, 19, it used to happen to me far too fucking often.
Yeah, I mean, and if it still happens to you, then that's good and exciting, and you should indulge it and you should feed it, because clearly there is something there that needs to be expressed.
But before we exonerate you of all creative quirks, I have a quote from you here, which is, I used to write battle rap bars and song lyrics on blank receipt paper while working retail at Whittard. I consider it a rite of passage for creative people with jobs they don't care about. So here's my question, because that's hilarious, but also kind of cool. My question is, what other creative quirks do you have? Do you have anything else about the way you put together work, or just ways you happen by whatever it is you're doing that you go, do you know what? I don't really see anyone else doing that. It's just sort of like something I do.
I don't in terms of like things that nobody else does, I don't think so. I think like I guess a lot of the ways that people create stuff, there are so many ways, but everyone seems to do every weird little thing at some point anyway, if that makes sense. So like, I don't know, I'll often write almost a whole song with like mumbly gibberish words, which I also know a bunch of songwriters who do that, but I think maybe for people who don't write songs that comes across a little bit weird if I'm playing you a demo and one of the verses is just because it's like you have the idea of like the rhythm or the placement or the melody in your head and you just haven't mapped the words onto it. So it's like little things like that, I guess, in terms of creative process that could be considered quirks, but like I would never pretend be like I'm so out there and so quirky in the way that I write, because I feel like most people do that kind of stuff.
Well, you touched on something there as well that's quite interesting, because I used to be a painter, an artist, drawer, all the rest of it, and it's easy to see when an artwork's coming together. You can kind of, it's like a loading screen almost. You can see the progress of it. But music, I think it's got to be different. I've never been a musician, so it's difficult for me to contextualize. But how do you know when a song's done? How do you know when it's kind of reached a position or a point where you're happy enough with it to release it? Because I imagine, like most people, right, the first time someone hears this song, that's the way they'll always remember it. So I got to make sure it hits the way I want it to.
Crucially, I can't speak for like just say like being a songwriter, because the way that I'd make music, because I'm also producing and mixing it, there's like I kind of have to have my hands on every step of the process. And with that in mind, a song is never finished. You just stop working on it at a certain point. So it's like when you're mixing, especially, a mix is never done. You just have to like draw a line and go like, I'm just not continuing past this point, because you can tweak infinitely and you can keep going back and forth and be like, oh yeah, but the high end on that reverb just sounds a little bit too and then you absolutely drive yourself insane. So like and so, similarly, every verse you can go back and you can rethink like, is this the perfect X, Y, or Z? And if you've listened to the song 100 times, the answer is invariably going to be no, because you're too close to it and stuff. So you kind of just have to stop. You have to have the self-restraint to be like, I need to trust the feeling that I first had. So like, I feel like in a creative process, there'll be a feeling you have relatively early on where you feel like you've just started to crack it, and you write or you create a certain element of it where you're like, that's exactly what it wants to be, and you get really excited and you want to listen to it back over and over again, or you want to stare at it, whatever medium it is. That feeling for me happens quite early on, and then by the end of the process I've completely forgotten about it and I hate the song, or whatever, I'm just like sick of hearing it. And you just have to trust in your previous taste, that it's worth drawing the line there and being like, yeah, that's good to go.
I'm so happy there are so many different parallels in the creative elements to that, because while what this gentleman does is inherently more sophisticated and complicated than anything I do, I press a button.
I don't think that's true. I can't let you get away with that. I know you're trying to compliment me, but it's not true. If you're making stuff, you're making stuff, and that's the end of that.
You're right. I tied my own tie today. Look at me.
Hell yeah, you did, and you look fantastic.
I am a big boy. But speaking of big boy, actually, fuck it. I don't care how it's taken. I'm turning it into a thing. Speaking of big boys, I want to know, and I will explain. Are you getting residuals from Bizzo Bond yet, or do I need to talk to him about sending you a check?
Residuals from Bizzo Bond? Why would I be getting?
There's a very good reason why you should be getting residuals from Bizzo Bond, my friend.
Is this well, I know that he sometimes the Preston grime scene gets referenced every now and then.
No, this is maybe a deep cut for some people, because even though he's now using it and making a lot of money from this, you're actually the one that said it first. So against him, in your battle with him, I have the dates, against what I've called Baby Bizzo on the 31st of August 2015, it's fun to see how both careers have progressed. Heretic even proclaims Bizzo is that guy in an odd foreshadowing moment. Now, he has gone on to make t-shirts with that on. My question is, do you need me to tap him up to get you some goddamn residuals? Because I know he goes to holiday in Dubai, son. You are not short of a quid, Biz. I've seen your studio. Do we need to get you some money?
You know what? I'm happy for him to take it and run with it. I'm happy to have given him that leg up the ladder that he clearly needed from me, of all people, to be able to get his holidays in Dubai. So fair enough. Roll with it, my son. He's definitely older than me as well, isn't he?
Do you know what though? Here's the thing. I'm older than all of you, and that really makes me sad sometimes, that I'm like, oh no, I was their age when I was watching you guys, and I look back, I'm like, oh no, I wasn't. I was older then too, and time has merely caught up with me like it catches up with all of us. But my existential crisis aside, I do want to segue into battle rap for just a tiny moment,
Of course,
which is,
yeah, for sure.
I want to ask what your opinion of your legacy is, because here's the thing. I still think that a lot of your stuff is underrated for its time, even though you got your props. And I also think that you are a rare example of your battles holding up with the test of time, where a lot of battlers from that era, you're starting to see a lot of their stuff is either extremely dated, it's not complex enough compared to this era, or it's just not entertaining, whereas you seem to strike a balance with all of it. So my question is, without going into, every single battle and every bar that was ever spat, what's your view on your own legacy within it?
I mean, God, I think I don't know if you've seen when you use the word legacy, it made me laugh because there's a video of Mike Tyson literally like yesterday or the day before
where he fucking verbally eviscerated an 8-year-old.
It's like his little girl asked him what his legacy is. He goes, I don't think about legacy because I'm going to die, and when I'm dead, nothing matters. Oh, it's so
We're all dust. We're all just dust to an 8-year-old who's just going like this. Pretending to have some idea.
If I have one thing in common with Mike Tyson, it will be that I guess I feel similarly about battle rap. Like I don't feel like I especially had much of an impact on the scene, really. So in terms of legacy, I feel like my battle rap legacy is to have been a sort of serviceable mid-tier battle rapper for a couple of years. Teed up an all-time performance from Shuffle T, and to be honest, I'm perfectly happy for that to be my contribution. I think I had a decent run, and I'm really glad of the experience that I had, and I feel like it taught me a lot. I've not watched back any of my battles in ages because it just makes me physically cringe myself inside out. I'd imagine you're probably right that some of it will age better than some of my peers from that time, just because of the kind of a lot of the chokes that got made. I think there's probably still loads of stuff that I said in battles that would be kind of cancel worthy in terms of problematic humor or whatever. But even at the time, I felt like I was doing that way less than a lot of other people. So I guess as time goes on, you feel like, okay, the guys who went in for the really, really kind of edgy, contentious humor, might not fare so well for a new viewer in 2024, but I mean, it is what it is. I still, at the same time though, I feel like Enigma is gonna have a bigger battle rap legacy than me because of how long he was around and how many high profile battles he did. So I don't think being slightly less controversial than Enigma would particularly serve me very well for my legacy either. But I had fun.
I mean, I watched a lot of your battles today, and I don't remember really going oh, couldn't say that today too often, if ever. But no, the reason I ask is because, look, battle rap is different things to different people, and I know that not everyone gets in it to be the champ and the body. Oh, I've got the biggest body yard thing. But my point there is that, it like you said, it teaches you things. It also ingratiates you in ways to people that you can then see that they also have creative endeavors, and it connects you in different ways. I guess the question I wanted to ask you is, now that there's a parting of the ways between you and battle rap, and like you say, you've kind of moved onto your own creative endeavors. Is what did you take away from it? What were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of how it tested you, or what it forced you to try and get better at in order to then become a better musician, writer, performer, whatever the case may be?
For sure, loads. So I think the first one would be it forces you to hold yourself to a much higher standard in terms of rhyming and structure and lyrics and all that kind of stuff. In terms of the battle rappers are the most advanced lyricists in existence, in terms of your kind of top tier battle rappers are doing the most complicated things with the English language imaginable, and having been a part of that and witnessed it and nerded out over it at the highest level means that the bar in my head of what the ideal is much higher, I think, than it would have been had I never done battle rap. So that's one thing for sure. Another would be in terms of live performance, I've been on stage in a bunch of different capacities throughout my life as a musician, as an actor or whatever, and battle rap is by a considerable margin the most terrifying of all, because not only do you have to win over the room, and not only do you have to perform and get people on your side, but there's also someone else trying to turn the room against you and laughing at your expense and oohing and ahhing at your expense. So I think it really hardens you to being able to step on stage and kind of be composed and hold your own. So that when I do like my own solo gigs, or when I'm playing with a band and it's a bigger stage or a bigger crowd than I'd normally be used to, I feel like I'm much less nervous than I would be, because I remember like, oh, I did a rap battle at like Ministry of Sound, so like that, you know, compared to that, you know, this is okay, this is chill. And also like the other thing would probably be like the culture around it. I don't know if you noticed or remembered, but there was definitely a period of time where like the level of like hate comments that I'd get on YouTube would be absolutely insane. And that's one of those things where like the very first time it happens, you're like, oh god, this is horrible, and you spend a couple of days feeling awful about yourself because you're reading all of these things, but then you very, very quickly just learn to kind of laugh about it and get used to it. And so that then made me pretty kind of impervious to being dogpiled on the internet or whatever, and like that I'm not too worried or fixated about negative attention either. So those would probably be my three takeaways. You get held to a higher standard of writing, you become like a more comfortable performer, and you are not as bothered by people talking shit about you.
I'm still working on that last one, but the other two, I can see your perspective. And again, it's weird for me being on the outside, because I look at battle rap as being like a performance rather than a strict competition, and it's incumbent upon you to just come and make sure your half of the dance is completed, as it were, you know what I mean? Whereas a song or performing a live set, I see as being more daunting, because not only are you trying to replicate and convey everything that you put into the song in the recording element, you're trying to reach people in a crowd when the circumstances are different. Like, people are physically there to see you, as opposed to they might have heard you in passing or clicked on your song and just checking you out. Like, I feel like the expectations are a little bit different, because even within battle rap, the reason they're there is different, and therefore the expectations are a little bit different, to your point. But I feel like from a creative standpoint, more of yourself is there on a song. Like, if people really don't resonate with you on stage in that situation, that sounds terrifying to me, as opposed to someone just doesn't laugh at a joke I wrote.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I mean, that's true, but I guess for me it just doesn't feel that way so much. So like with battle rap, I was very, very competitive. So, and obviously there's different approaches. Like, some people do rap battles and they're just there to rap and show off, and it's like two guys and they're both rapping and showing off, and like, you know, they're all, you know, reacting to each other's bars, and it's all like, you know, there's that kind of like really cool, nice, pleasant vibe to it. Whereas I kind of always went in with, even though I was being quite lighthearted, I always went in with a very competitive, like, no, I need to win, I need to surgically dismantle, and I need to find the right angle to get under the, and then like, I think there's also the element, on the flip side, where you're kind of aware that there will be people in the crowd who would love to see you get bodied, and there'll be people in the crowd who would just love to see someone get bodied. So like, if you go to a boxing match, people are just really excited when someone gets knocked out. People go crazy. So like, you don't want to be the guy who gets knocked out and everyone goes up in flames, being like, oh my god, how you know, entertaining to see this guy being completely torn down and humiliated. So I think there's that kind of underlying element. But then also in the terms of like doing a solo show, I don't feel like, I've never turned up to a solo gig and felt like anyone was rooting for me to fail, which certainly helps put you at ease a little bit more. And then it's also just, it feels a little bit more like an opportunity. You kind of maybe have a neutral room and you've got nothing to lose, but you've got everything to gain from, like, if you can connect with them or win them over, the worst thing they can do is just not be that arsed and just, you know, chat amongst themselves, which is fine. Whereas like, in a rap battle, you really do have everything to lose.
You've walked into rooms before where people weren't rooting for you to fail? What's that like?
When people weren't rooting for me to fail.
Yeah, I walk into every room and someone's trying to shoot me. I need to know, what's it like to be just even indifferent
I don't
towards?
believe that. Well, you book yourself a gig opening for some random artist who you've never heard of, and no one in that crowd will have heard of you, and then you'll have maybe 10 or 15 people early on in the gig who've bothered to come down for the support act, who are completely indifferent to your existence, and then you can see if you can reach out to them and offer them something that they might find interesting or whatever, and maybe you'll surprise yourself. It's great. It's good fun.
I don't know, my name, even just the name Lorne, seems to be like a finger up people's noses. They go, huh? Lorne? What? Is that, what, that's a name? Like, anyway, again, existential crisis aside, I have another question for you, and only a few more, I promise, because
No, not at all.
I have to limit the number of creative, because I could just go into the nuance of everything, and I'm a nerd. But my question is, okay, you're a musician. And we are in an era where the great thing is that, listen, if you want to be something, you get to try it. You get to be the opportunity. And there's instructions for everything. There's encouragement from anywhere. But the problem then becomes, it's crowded out here. So the question I have for you is, how do you feel about having to, because you've kind of been at a point just before the cusp of that when it started to be everything was on social media, to now where everything is on social media, to the point where even you referenced it there, making a table, I missed that because you posted it on your Instagram, not on your Twitter. And so it's multiple platforms, it's multiple time zones, it's different fucking audiences everywhere. How do you keep on top of it all, and how do you stand out in a crowd?
Well, I don't really. That's the short answer. I don't have loads of followers on social media. I don't go viral all the time. If I had the I guess the discipline, motivation, inclination to, like, for each one of my songs make 10 different Instagram reels for each one and try and gain the algorithm, then maybe I would see more success out of it or whatever. But I mean, I haven't. I don't.
Do you really think that, or is that because you are being so self-deprecating and rawly honest? I applaud it, but like I think you're selling yourself short in this chat. I got to be honest with you.
Well, I think again, it's that thing of, like I mentioned at the start, like there's like the quote optimal way of doing things, where like if I am a musician, then the optimal way to do things is write all my singles, or like write a handful of singles, have like 50 million different TikTok video ideas, syndicate them across all of the reels, platforms, whatever, have them go viral, do decent numbers at least 5 or 6 times, so that you have like hype around it before you drop it, and then time the release so that you can sort of ride the wave of the Spotify algorithm, and that you can get pre-saved on the playlist, and there's all of that. And I've not gone that hard really in the stuff that I've done. So I've definitely across all of my disciplines, I do a sort of suboptimal strategy on that front, but I think that just feels realistic to me in terms of like the output that I'm capable of. And I just feel like I end up having to just be like, I will make whatever like I feel I'm capable of, and then just kind of offer it up. And then it's a case of like, well, fingers crossed, it's kind of out there in the ether now, in case anyone is interested enough to engage or pick it up. But yeah, I couldn't tell you how to stay on top of all of the things because actually, if like the sensible thing is not to be a musician and a comedy writer and a woodworking hobbyist who also, because every time I post about one of these things, people are like, oh, Harry, you should start a YouTube channel about your woodworking. And I'm like, I barely have like 45 minutes a day to like actually sit down and think like, am I actually doing something sensible right now, or am I just following like my base impulses to grab things and turn them into bits of matter that I find amusing? So like from the get-go, I'm not doing the optimal thing, because the optimal thing, if you want to be a musician, you be a musician and you focus on that and you strategize. But where's the fun in that?
Sorry, that might be the greatest answer of any question I've ever given. Against, just actually, when you think about it, I shouldn't. It's all kind of bollocks when you think like. To immolate oneself like that in a moment is the most fucking hilariously honest thing I've ever seen. But right, I got to push back a little bit in so much as because I agree with you. Fucking give me a second. That was hilarious. Where was I? Oh, that was it. I agree with you. I when I started on YouTube, it was fucking everyone yelling at everyone else, eyes wide emoji, fucking thumbnails and everything, and I saw. This is bull. No one actually likes it. It's just what everyone does. And those are two different things. I want to do this because I don't care that the fact that it's different doesn't actually bother me. The fact that it's what I think should be done and it's the way I want to do it does bother me. So, but the thing I always thought about that is that that's also what the people that will watch me will think. They're the ones that will stick around, that they get that. So my question is, as far as like what you're trying to do as a musician, because look, even every musician ultimately needs, or artist needs an audience. You want your work to be at least viewed, love it or hate it. What would be ideal for you then? How would you want to reach an audience if you could cultivate it or chart your own path forward without having to ride the algorithm, so to speak? Because I can see you grimacing about it, like it fucking sucks. We have to do this. I can see it.
Yeah, no, I think you've probably hit on it there. I think I quite like the idea of like I will just try and offer up as much as I can of all of the bits and bobs that I do, and as and when people are interested in like just receiving what I have to offer and engaging with it, that's fantastic. So like I'm actually quite happy. Like I grimace at the thought of like, you know, funneling myself into like this particular whatever current optimal TikTok strategy is, but that's only because like I'm actually quite happy to not do it, and I'm quite content with the idea that like I'm gonna do all of this stuff and I'm gonna present myself in this way, and maybe at some point that will be the optimal social media strategy. Maybe not, probably not. But if not that, but like that's fine, and like I'm happy. I'd much rather be able to post a song one day and then a side table the other day and then a random little rant of a thought that's come into my head and then a short film that I'd made with my friend and for people to be like, cool, like a little bit of tapas or whatever, than to feel like I need to post about the same song 100 times over until that's, you know, done enough numbers that I can then move on to the next thing, because I'm just not that arsed about that. And I feel like if there's an audience for whatever it is that I'm offering, I'll probably find them eventually, and great. And then if not, that's fine. I'm just making my things.
I want to ask you another selfish question, and I'm going to ask you to opine on this a little bit. Do you worry about what that culture does to people that could be potentially your audience? Like the way it's gearing people to, and I use this phrase very tortuously, and I'm sorry people, consume content. Do you worry about what it does? Because I do. I've seen how good my shorts do compared to my interviews, and it genuinely is like, oh no, it got thousands. Oh no.
Yeah.
Like, I'm almost resentful that it worked, because I want it to... Well, genuinely, like, yeah, I'm like, what the fuck, guys? Why are you buying into this bullshit? What's your take?
Oh God, I don't know. I try to not get too fixated or upset and annoyed about it, because I also see this problem emerging also in the world of musicians, where you have the people like slogging it out doing the TikTok grind or whatever, but you also seem to have just as many people who are 24/7 furious and bitter and just so like angry at the fact that they have to make, or people act as if they have to make TikTok videos. And I feel like there's something in between, or something just kind of like indifferent to those things. So like I think doing the TikTok strategy or whatever, you know, your YouTube shorts, that's good and fine. I think it's just about a case of like finding a way to do it that feels authentic to you and that doesn't feel like soul destroying. And really it's just like there's a person I vaguely know called Uzo, who should follow. I can't remember what their Instagram @name is, but I'll send you it afterwards so you can put it on the screen. They're generally they're a great artist and an interesting person with great takes on this sort of thing. And they said something the other day that was literally just like, you can see the making of that content, not as like, here I am doing corporate promo content for my, whatever my art is, but just like, how do I translate this thing I've made into a different medium? And to just like do that in a way that you find fulfilling or interesting. So rather than becoming a whole like, oh God, I've got to do another 50 of these before I can count myself successful in my field, it can just be a case of like, well, I've made this thing. What would that look like as a 30-second vertical video? Is there a way that I can make that in a way that I think is cool and would be proud of? And if you're able to think of it like that, then great. You're not making content. You're just continuing to be an artist and just doing it across, various different platforms. So yeah, I think it's just a case of trying not to get too caught up, fixated on either like doing it this one specific way or like resenting the fact that the platforms exist, because I feel like either or both of them can kill you.
Right, it's Sophie's choice time, I'm afraid, my friend, because I need to ask you the one question no artist will ever answer.
Okay.
What's your most favorite thing that you've ever made, written, produced, released? What is the one thing that you go, right, God? Hi, Harry here. I'd like to get into heaven because I contributed to something greater than myself, and here it is for your consideration. What are you putting in front of the big man to justify eternal salvation?
I don't know about eternal salvation. I think, God, that it's a difficult question. I want to give you an answer, and I will give you an answer. I think the difficulty is that it changes all the time, because it's like, I'll forget about a song that I've written, and then I'll listen to it back, and I'll be like, wow, maybe that's where I peaked, because it'll just kind of reconnect with me in a way that I was like, oh, fuck, yeah, that was great. And then I'll hate the same song like 6 months later. I think like maybe the third or fourth song that I put out was a song called Serenity, and there's the sort of B section bridge type thing. It's probably the best like passage of music / production that I've put together, at least in my current mind. So I'd put that song up and offer that up to the pearly gates and go, have a taste of that bridge.
He actually answered the question. I was expecting it. No. There's no way. I mean, and no, he gave it up. Fair play.
But it's not,
all right.
I mean, it's not even. Yeah, I think like because Sophie's choice is the wrong way to describe things, because Sophie's choice implies that she loves both of her children more than more than anyone could possibly imagine. But I feel like as a creative, you simultaneously love and despise everything you've made in various different ways. So I feel like it's easier to answer because there'll be, if you ask me right now, there'll be plenty of songs or verses or moments or things that I made. I'll be like, oh yeah, that can fuck off. Erase that from history altogether. And then some stuff, not so much. So yeah.
I get you. And the only reason I label it as Sophie's choice is because you feel like you I don't know. You feel like sometimes you got to put no, it's my body of work. It's me. It's every moment was intrinsic to me, and therefore it speaks. But no, you took it like a champ, and fair play. But I have a slightly, well, no, it's not a tougher follow up. I should have switched it. But my follow up question to that is, okay, as a musician, as a songwriter, producer, live performer, what's the song you wish you'd written? What's the one thing or something that you've been like? Because for me, it's the Gorillas. I wish I'd drawn the characters for the Gorillas. I love the fucking design, the originals, the 2D designs for the Gorillas. I just think it's fucking dope. Yeah. But I didn't. I was 10 years and untalented too late. What's your thing?
Oh, gosh. There are loads. I feel like I come across songs quite often where I'm like, that's genius. and I wish I'd written it. I'm trying to think what any recent examples would be. There are also like often just like not at all the kind of music you'd expect me to write, like not in my usual genre, but just in terms of like they just capture something so ingeniously. There's a song called When You Think of Me by JP Sachs, which is dead simple premise, immaculately executed. I recently have been listening to the new album by Mustafa called Dunya, which completely like stopped me in my tracks, like instantly has become like one of my favorite albums ever. And that is like full top to bottom with things I'm like, this is like sublime genius, kind of like you can't pinpoint, you can't like teach it, you can't, that's just like, that's emerged from somewhere, and I wish it could have emerged from my pathetic mortal brain. Yeah, I feel like I come across those things all the time. Basically every Stevie Wonder song. I'm like a zealous Stevie Wonder fan. Songs in the Key of Life is, for my money, the best album ever. So like something like Love's in Need of Love Today, like my God, like it's perfect. It's perfect. I wish I could write anything even close.
And second to last question, I want you to wrestle with this for a little bit because I know it's something you probably don't even think of. But like, I don't want to say what you've achieved when all is said and done, but like creatively, is there anything you're aspiring to do? Is there anything you want to be able to look forward to, like the fucking Sistine Chapel of your body of work? Like the one thing you go, right, nothing will ever I might do more successful things, but creatively, nothing will ever top this for me. Is there anything that springs to mind in that respect, in your field or in something you haven't even tried yet but want to? Is it riffing a solo at Glastonbury? Is it performing live in Times Square at New Year's Eve? Is it, I don't know, is it having a moment of, like, I don't know, it, like everyone has that weird, I know I do, I have a vision in my mind of a moment in time when if it ever happens, I'm like, oh, all right, well, okay, job done, God, take me, I'm never going to beat this.
It's funny because I think one problem that a lot of people have, and I think a lot of people who see any level of success, is that the goalposts are constantly moving, right? Like the level that you think that when I get there, I'll be so happy. As soon as you get there, you're like, oh, but as soon as I get to whatever the level is 10 times up. And I think I've had an interesting experience in the fact that, so I play keys in my friend's band, who's called Caspian, and that project's done really, really well. So like we can tour the US and do sold out headline shows in LA or whatever. And so for me, the idea of my solo project being successful enough that I could do a sold out headline show in New York or LA, that would be like, okay, I'm done, tick, I've achieved it all, I'm going to be happy for the rest of my life. But obviously that one of my best friends is in that position, and I know that that's like, it's great and it's exciting, but I don't think that he feels like that's my life completely finished and complete now, because you evolve and you kind of get used to things, and you're like, you're the options kind of open up before you. I think in terms of things that I haven't done yet, which I would love to be able to do, would be to have even just like some sort of full room headline show where I can do like an album's worth of songs. Oh, you might hear a little meow because my cat has just walked in because she knows it's nearly dinner time. So there's that, but there's also like, I write like comedy and I do script writing and stuff with a friend of mine, and I really want to like make a TV show at some point, or have a TV show made. And that's one of those things that you can't really do yourself. If you're a musician, you can make your own album and release your own album. If you're like a screenwriter, you're pretty fucked unless you can convince someone to pay for it and coordinate it and broadcast and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that would be one where I'd be like, if I were to get the opportunity to do that, that would be unreal. I'd consider that a pretty big one.
And I lied. One last quick question, if I may. What's the coolest moment of your career to date? What's the one moment you think back on, knowing where you came from and where you are now, and you go, huh, I did that. That's pretty fucking cool.
Oh, God, I don't know.
Even if it's just learning in it, like, I can't tell you, if I look at myself in 20 years and I actually learnt the guitar, 34-year-old me is going to go, that's pretty fucking cool. But it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I sort of feel like I should feel like that about, and maybe I'm being guilty of like trying to give you the answer that's like the correct answer.
That's what I mean. What's cool to you though? That's the interesting thing, because like moments mean different things to different people. But for you, it might just be, what it could be literally just a moment where you're like, do you know what? That was just pretty fucking cool. And people are like, that was cool. Yeah, but to me, it was the fucking dopest thing in the world, man.
I think really it will have been. So like, I've played a few little solo shows before. You know what So Far Sounds is? It's like a sort of stripped back gigs where like they're sort of secret location and no one knows what the artists are playing, but people buy tickets anyway and they kind of turn up. And so as a performer, you sort of have a captive audience of like 50 to 100 people who've never heard of you before, and it's kind of your chance to like connect with them really. And I've done a couple of shows like that, and I think my favorite moments have always been, because I've, you know, gone and played through all of these kind of emotionally punishing songs, and then on the occasions where I've had someone come up to me afterwards and be like, that particular song or lyric like really meant a lot to, like, you know, that I really felt that. Those are the moments where I'm like, oh fuck yeah, I need to remember that's why this is worth doing. And those are the things that, yeah, that feel the best.
Goddamn right. Well, there you go. And then the dismount. I'm sorry to have to do this to you, but we have to do this as always, because we are all slaves to the algorithm, and we also need to make sure that people know where they can find you and support you. So my question is, where can people find you, support you, follow you, buy tickets, and make sure that you can do all the cool shit you want to do one day by giving you and lending you their support, attention, and all of their money? Where can they do that?
Sure. So I'm at Harry J Robinson on Instagram and TikTok, at Harry J Rob on Twitter, because you don't get as many characters on Twitter. You can also find Missing Richard on Instagram and TikTok as well, I think, which is the sort of comedy writing, producing, directing side project that I have. So you can find me there and you can see all the various bits and bobs that I get up to.